Welcome to Gregorian Chat.
Hello, and welcome to this
Order.
episode of Gregorian Chat
Yes, we're going to be chatting, just like our good old Saint Gregory.
with our great friend St. Gregory, who we take with us every time. But we're in a different room. We're almost in a different room every podcast now.
Yes. Yeah, now you
just-
left me.
We like to chop and change it.
Ah.
But no, I've been hanging around at Chaplaincy for the last week,
Yes.
like a disease.
Yep, yeah. Like a long forgotten story. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, because you've been on break, eh?
I have been.
How is it? Is this your first break?
This is my first break ever as a teacher.
Yeah.
So it's term one has been done, and next week Monday we'll begin a new term. I don't want to think about that right now, but it is good to be here today for a very controversial episode titled.
Is it, are gay people going to hell?
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Are gay people going to hell?
That's the question. It's been inspired by our very good friend. No, we don't know him. Israel Falou. Is that how you say his name?
Well, yeah. Actually, Justin Timberlake references him in a song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Show me how to fight for love. Let me tell you, baby, it was easy coming back into you once I forgive it low. But anyway, not true.
No, that's a different story.
But anyway, it's topical.
Yes, because Israel Falou, for those of you who don't know, an Australian rugby player, has made some comments recently regarding on whether or not gay people are going to hell. He says they are going to hell unless they repent and convert. So that's and it's caused a lot of drama. A lot of people are quite up in arms about it. They're just going like,
Walking around like this.
I just read the tweet.
Yeah, it's been hugely controversial, but also one of those things that I feel like has probably been. He definitely was baited, and that's,
Yes.
you can see that like from the question he was asked. Well, what do you think about it? But anyway, we don't want to I don't want to put necessarily too much emphasis on whether or not we think Falou was right or wrong, but more just to pull it apart a bit more and be like, how do we? Because this does raise good questions for us as Catholics.
Well, yeah, I think it puts us all Christians really in a tough spot, really, because he's trying to be a faithful Christian and he's doing what the Bible teaches, and sometimes what the Bible teaches is pretty harsh. And it's like, okay, is that therefore the right answer, or is there more to it? And there is always more to it. You can never teach theology in a soundbite, a tweet, or an Instagram comment.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that's the world we're in. But especially around the topic of like judgment and like especially homosexuality, it's like how do we react as a Catholic people? So that's what we're hoping to pull apart in this podcast. However, before we go any further, I don't want to go down to oolong because we've got a cup of tea waiting for you. It's oolong berry, and it smells delicious. So we're just gonna pour that out.
Yeah, we've been patroning T2 once again to get the best of their great teas. I think they have about 250, and they keep bringing out other ones too. So, I mean, we've tried it one every podcast pretty much. So we've tried at least 50 of their teas. I do believe. I know the first couple of episodes we didn't have them, but it's great because there's just so much to try. Let's see. Oh man, so oolong is a mix. It's like in between green tea and black tea.
Yeah,
I believe.
It's a bit of a mix.
Let's have a look. Oh, that goes down easy.
Oh, it's not as bad as I thought it'd be. I don't like green tea, see.
Okay. Why did you get oolong then?
Because I thought it'd be interesting, and I was right. It's very interesting. We have a microphone each, by the way, guys.
Yeah, we decided to change it up. Anyway, this podcast is not about
microphones,
the
or
little
even
things
oolong
about
tea.
microphones. We know that you only watch it for our outrageous good looks, so you just enjoy, and we're just going to sit here for another 15 minutes. I'm just wondering how long you were going to hold that.
I was just waiting for you, bro.
Anyway, on to our topic of humility. Now, what was it again? Are gay people going to hell? See, the thing that has spurred the discussion for me has been a reaction to what I feel like is an overused sentiment by Christians who say every time that they hear something controversial or something that has to do with people's personal choices or moral inclinations, is that they kind of use this get out of jail free card and say, well, who am I to judge? You know, someone's like, oh well, you know, there's a gay guy living, you know, with his husband or whatever, or there's anything from, like, you know, there was somebody who committed fraud. It's like, oh, well, but usually with fraud and things, we don't say, well, who am I to judge, right?
No, right, yeah.
We're not. It's like, oh, who am I to judge? He only raped someone, or saying that, I don't want you to think that I'm just gonna throw homosexuality in with the same kind of basket as rape. Certainly not. But what I would say is that I do get annoyed with the frequency of Christians who use I'm not going to judge anyone as a get out of jail free card for having to take a stand on moral issues, and especially just reflecting on the fact that we are moral beings. You know, as Catholics, as Christians, we believe that God has created us in the image and likeness of Himself, and He is truth, which means that by necessity we are moral beings needing to make moral distinctions. Yeah,
and I think it's good pointing that out. It's like, oh, who am I to judge? But that's only mentioned with like lifestyle choices. Yes. When there's something that's objectively wrong, it's like, oh, you don't use that. Which surely judgment isn't only about lifestyle choices. Judgment is everything.
Well, yeah, and more so, the really big thing.
Yeah. So how do we use our judgment properly? And like a bit more prudence is like, when do we judge? When do we judge out loud? And how do we using Israel's comment as a situation, it's like probably not the best thing to say, especially the fact that he wrote hell in capital letters. I mean, that's just not nice. But because like also like regarding the question on like homosexuals, when Pope Francis was asked famously, he answered, you know, he seemed to be answering saying, who am I to judge? But he prefaced it with, as long as they're living, you know, a good and holy life, who am I to judge? Which is
a really interesting preface.
Well, and I think it's important to point out because there is a gay like kind of culture, and it doesn't promote like the wholeness of life. I feel it's not like a family friendly situation. Like you see like gay pride things where people wearing like bondage equipment
in public, and they're like, let's just celebrate.
And it's like that's not part of it. But like also I think it's important because it's saying that you being gay isn't who you are. It's an aspect maybe of you. You are a human person. You are a child of God. You have a life to live and gifts to give. So I think it's so we have a greater calling than our sexual orientation, than our lifestyle choice.
Right, and I think there's been an over-sexualization in our culture, which has made people really bring that to the forefront of discussions all the time. It's like it's always about sexuality. Why? Well, it's not surprising when you see these pride parades and stuff, and it's like, whether or not you agree with bondage and that kind of thing, it's like, it's just not the right place for sexuality. Out in the street, you know, if anything, if you want to say like we should be entitled to our own sexuality and be able to keep it sacred in our own way, well, great, do that like in your own time. I'm not saying do bondage in your own time. Preface it.
Well, don't do it in someone else's time either. But if you're going, going to do it,
let's not go there. That's just.
But again, I think something that's important to point out, and Father Chris pointed out when we were talking about it with him, is this isn't like solely a homosexual problem. Like sexual sin, everyone does. It happens with heterosexual all the time. It's like, you know, cohabitation and sleeping around, not even in loving relationships, you know, being promiscuous, you know, that's wrong, and that's just as bad.
Right. And Paul throws all those things together in the New Testament when he talks about them quite frequently. He'll say, you know, fornicators, adulterers, and it's just like a huge list of people. It's like he's not saying, I'm going to name every single one of the people in the communities of Corinthians or whatever who are fornicating, adultering, and those people are going to hell. He's just saying, hey guys, this is not the way we're supposed to be living. And like you say, you know, it's not as if, I mean, it isn't like homosexuality is not even I mean, you might say it's an anachronism, like, but let's stay away from that for a second. But I think, as you were saying, in the church, it's, I guess, part of the stigma that has come with gay people in particular is that if you see two people together who are of the same sex at church, then it's automatically, you know that there's what you would consider a disordered relationship going on, in the sense that, not in the same way that people who are heterosexual, if you see them come to church, you might just think, oh, okay, they're boyfriend and girlfriend. And so a lot of Catholics who would be, against gay marriage or something would not have qualms about that. They wouldn't necessarily feel the need to question it further and say, oh, I wonder if they're cohabitating. I wonder if they're fornicating, And whereas that's a real problem, and that's something that would be really difficult, because as Father Chris was saying, even if there was, from what Pope Francis was saying, people who are truly seeking God and loving God, they're in a gay relationship, but it doesn't take on a physical element, then it's like, well, there comes that quote again, who am I to judge?
Yeah.
But the thing that I really want to talk about is like judgment. Like, what is it for us to judge? Because surely we need to make moral distinctions, right?
Right.
And I feel like the word judge gets thrown around too much, because it's like, well, we have people who are called judges, and their job is to judge. And so it's kind of like, well, we set up in society these rules and these standards, and then we set up people to judge the rules. And so obviously we're not all judges, but we should be judges of things that are moral. And so I think I prefer to use the word condemnation. Like, who am I to condemn that person?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. And I think about the word, because the word isn't a bad thing, it's just a thing. And you think of the word commandment. If you're being commanded to do something, it's kind of like, oh no, because that's horrible. I don't want to be commanded to do anything. But Jesus commands us. He sends us for us like, this is my commandment. You have to do this, and then you'll get heaven.
Right.
And what is that commandment? It's like, I want you to love one another. It's like, well, that's not a commandment. It's like, no, I'm commanding you to do it. It's serious. I want you to do it. In that sense, it's a commandment. It's a serious instruction. And judgment's on the same thing. And so, I suppose if you think about, because you think about judgment of like, along the lines of condemnation. But what if you thought about it in a different way? Let me know what you think about this. Is I'm trying to judge, how do I love this person best? And that can make it seem a bit too airy-fairy, but sometimes loving someone is saying what you're doing is wrong and you need to stop doing that. So how do I love this person best? Is it the most loving situation right now to tell, if when someone asks me, what do you think about gay people, they're going to hell?
Right.
Unless, it's like, probably a better way of phrasing that would be, everybody who sins needs to repent and come back to God. That's the same thing as what Israel Falou said. But it wasn't gay people are going to hell.
Well, I kind of like the way of seeing it, because then it's like, well, judgment is not just bad people getting what they deserve. It's also good people getting what they deserve. And that's justice, the true meaning of justice. And so the reason that we often live in fear of that is because we rely solely on God's grace to be saved. And so, but if you're talking about judgment in that sense, then it's like you judge that person according to how much Jesus would love them.
Yeah.
And I think when you see in the New Testament the way that Jesus responds to sin, and this is the way that we should approach, what you could say is, I guess, any of the arena of the homosexual stuff, if you see it as a sin, then it's like, what Jesus said is, okay, follow me, that's the most important thing. But, it's kind of like, turn away from sin and follow me. So even as Pope Francis was saying, there's always that preface there, which is like, you need to be seeking me. And you need to be living a life that is oriented towards God. And that's really tough. And I think the Catholic Church, has a hard stance to put forward here, not just talking about the big rules and stuff, but every individual Catholic, because you can't be seen as, I guess, condoning the gay political movement, because it's fundamentally skewed, and has fundamentally skewed views on a lot of things. For instance, the value of traditional marriage. But more fundamentally, the sexuality of the human person, life-giving relationships, things like that. And so, like Father Chris was saying, if a gay guy if a guy who's confessed in confession or whatever comes to mass to receive communion, and for all that the priest knows, he might have been to confession this morning, but the priest can't just refuse him the sacrament because
he's gay, because
he has same-sex attraction.
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous. However, if that same person was to come into church with, like, a gay pride shirt or something on, well, then he's making an attestation to the value of that movement and saying, actually, the church is fundamentally wrong, and I will oppose it publicly in church, and that the church cannot be seen as condoning it. So,
So then we get into, like, what's scandalous, and it's like, okay, somebody who's gay that's going through a rough time, definitely support them and love them in what they need and help them out. But then if they're saying, okay, I'm now going to start a political party which teaches, things contrary to the Catholic Church, it's like, well, now I can't support you. Now you've taken a loving relationship, right, and now you're saying if you love me, you have to carry on along this path that I'm going on. And for yourself as well, but like for living a life that portrays what you believe, which is to love people, but it's also not one that is politically orientated towards what is wrong. Yeah,
and I guess the challenge for the church, once again, is like, how do we love people? Because I guess what you would say for people who are cohabitating and are heterosexual, it's like, well, you guys need to go through marriage preparation and get married, and that kind of thing. But it's a real struggle for people who have a same-sex attraction, because it's like, well, how are you going to orient them?
And it's also not on the same level, but in a similar way. If someone's had a sex addiction, it's like they just sleep around and sleep around and sleep around. It's like, you can't just say, well, then marry the next one you sleep with. That solves the problem.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You have to deal with something else. In the sex addiction case, it's an addiction. It's like, okay, you have to actually start seeing people as people, not just as objects.
Yeah.
And I can't really comment on how to, minister to, and I think this is the important point, is there isn't a way to minister to gay people.
Right.
There's a way to minister to people, and that's case by case.
Absolutely.
Like, somebody called David, and he's like, and he's maybe a different name then. You know someone that's called Stephen, hypothetically Stephen. And
hypothetically, Stephen.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sean.
And and he's gay, and you say what he needs help because he just wants to get more involved in mass. It's like, okay, that's the same way you treat anybody else that wants to get more involved in the mass.
Right. And it's a real challenge for me. I'll be the first one to admit that my disposition towards welcoming people, who are homosexual, is not the best. My first thought needs to be of love, and it's still not the way it is. I'm just going to be completely honest. And I think that for the majority of the church, that's the way it is. We haven't thought enough about this issue and about a solution. We've thought a lot about the fact that it's right or wrong, and about if it's morally good, but we haven't thought enough about, how are we going to solve it? And by solve it, I mean, how are we going to welcome people, but not betray the church's stance on traditional marriage or homosexuality. Yeah, it's a huge question. We want to know your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
We might have said something in this podcast that you completely disagree with. If that's so, please comment below. Like, we don't want you guys to shy away from calling us out.
Yeah, definitely.
Or agreeing if you think it's right, or continuing the discussion in some more fruitful way.
Yes, and I think it's a good discussion to have. And I think the only way we're going to get through it is through dialogue. So
absolutely.
Let's talk openly to each other about it and do our best to not offend.
We're actually going to probably do a 3-part series on Gregorian chat called Is the Catholic Church Homophobic? And we'll get a range of people on the show to talk about that. But yeah, stay tuned in for that.
Yes.
But thanks for joining us for this particular podcast.
God bless.
Hope you enjoyed the sound. Hearing us.
Kia ora.
Up close and personal.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. See ya.
God bless. Hey guys, thanks for watching the podcast. I've got good news. It just got a whole lot easier to search for us online.
All you got to do is search Gregorian Chat into YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, and Player FM for those who are on Android.
Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. See you later. God bless.